Hi guys, welcome to my blog. For today's video, we will talk about Chapter 2, Lesson 3, Ethnocentrism and Relativism. Thanks to the technological advancement, we are more exposed to many people belonging to different race and background through the years. Appearances, skin color, language, culture, and values became the social norms to separate people into different groups. We sometimes fail to understand and acknowledge that unique nature of other cultures. We tend to compare, evaluate, and judge from our point of view. Ethnocentrism. But first, let's define ethnocentrism. It is judging another culture solely by the values and standards of one's own culture. Ethnocentrism. It is primarily centered on your own culture, thinking that it is superior over the culture of others. In line with ethnocentrism example, in fashion, some people judge how people dress up. Katulad sa ating bansa, pag tayo ay nagsuot ng maikling mga damit, ay marami ng taong makakapaghusga sa iyo. What do we mean by ethnocentric? Ethnocentric, it is an individual who judge to other groups related to their own ethnic group or culture, especially with concern for language, behavior, customs, and religion. Pag sinabing ethnocentric ay nakasentro ka sa sarili mong kultura and you judge the culture of other people based on your culture. Another example is, I am a Cebuana. If I am an ethnocentric person, I will judge the way people talk in Bisaya, and that is absolutely wrong. It's okay to be proud of your culture, but you should never look down on other people's culture. Consider it as your inferior to your culture. Even though we deny it, most of us are ethnocentric in some parts of our lives. Some not even realizing that they are being ethnocentric at that moment. Katulad ng nasa larawan, hinuhulgahan nila ang batang lalaki na hindi nila kakulay. Pinagtatawanan nila ito dahil kakaiba ito sa kanila. William G. Summer, a classical liberal American social scientist, defined ethnocentrism as the technical name for the view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything, and all others are scaled and rated with reference to it. He also characterized it as an often leading to pride, vanity, beliefs of one's own group's superiority, and contempt of outsiders. The study of anthropology. But first, let's define anthropology. It is the systematic study of humanity with the goal of understanding our evolutionary origins, our distinctiveness as a species. And in line in the study of anthropology, ethnocentric are people born into a particular culture that grow up absorbing the values and behaviors of the culture, will develop a worldwide that consider their culture to be the norm or standard. People may experience other cultures that have different values and normal behaviors. They will find that the thought patterns appropriate to their birth culture are not appropriate for the new cultures. But people are accustomed to the birth culture, it can be very difficult for them to see the behaviors of people from different culture from their point of view of that culture rather than from their own. Cultural relativism. What do we mean by cultural relativism? It is the principle that an individual person's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. Cultural relativism, also defined as a seeking to understand another culture or way of life in its own terms or native terms rather than by our own cultural standards. Cultural relativism. For example, kung ako, titignan ko kung paano ang pagluluto ng isang kultura, hindi base doon sa sarili kong kultura, kundi base doon sa kultura nila. In that case, you are contextualizing. You are considering their situation. Cultural relativism is highly important to understand others' culture, not just by your own culture. Street foods becomes a culture to some country or places around the world, but some of the countries not yet acquainted with what kind of foods they have on street food. That's why when they eat for the first time or seeing it on the first glance, some of them would reject it, some of them disgusted with a little bit, but through cultural relativism, no matter how disgusting or how exotic it is, some of them would try to eat street food and how it tastes like because they respect others' culture. Cultural relativism was established by Franz Boas as accepted in anthropological research in the first few decades of the 20th century and later popularized by his students. Boas articulated the idea in 1887 as civilization is not something absolute but is relative, and our ideas and conceptions are true only so far as our civilization goes. Franz Boas, originally trained in physics and geography, argued that one's culture may mediate and thus limit one's perceptions in less obvious ways. He understood culture to include not only certain tastes in food, art, and music or beliefs about religion. Physical reactions, activities that characterize the behavior of the individuals composing a social group, collectively and individually in relation to their natural environment, to other groups, to members of the group itself, and of each individual to himself. To further understand ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, let's generalize them. Ethnocentrism. It is the tendency to assume that one's own culture and way of life represent the norm or are superior to all others. This ideology, individuals will judge other groups in relation to their own particular ethnic group or culture, especially with a concern to language, behavior, customs, and religion. Ethnocentrism. It is primarily centering on your own culture, thinking that it is superior over the culture of others. Another example is, I am a Cebuana. If I am an ethnocentric person, I will judge the way people talk in Bisaya, and that is absolutely wrong. It's okay to be proud of your culture, but you should never look down on other people's culture. Consider it as your inferior to your culture. Cultural relativism is the viewing of people's behavior from the perspective of their own culture. It is the belief that the culture of people serves particular needs and must be looked at in terms of the world the people inhabit. Cultural relativism. For example, kung ako, titignan ko kung paano ang pagluluto ng isang kultura, hindi base doon sa sarili kong kultura, kundi base doon sa kultura nila. In that case, you are contextualizing. You are considering their situation. Cultural relativism is highly important to understand others' culture, not just by your own culture.